Hi, and welcome to my third video in my Q&A video series that is talking all about body acceptance, stepping away from diet culture, and how can we learn to just be okay in our bodies just as they are. So in this video, I'm going to be addressing a question that came in from Anna, and Anna was asking, how do I stop scrutinizing my body and also stop scrutinizing the bodies of other people and then subsequently comparing myself to them? And I'm pretty sure there's not a person who can't relate to this on some level. The first thing I think that we really need to know and understand is that it's not our fault. Okay, we actually as humans are just designed to judge. That's what our minds do. They start to assess kind of what's good or bad, make decisions about things. So our minds just naturally want to judge. And when we are in a world that shows us and kind of trains us essentially to believe that certain bodies are good and certain bodies are bad, we start to make those associations in our minds and just naturally move forward with doing that. And so it can be really difficult to start to step away from that and then say, well, how do I accept my body, or how do I be okay with it if it doesn't look like what I've been told is good my whole life? Anna, when she submitted her question, also submitted a quote from the book Body Respect. And it said, the quote was, "My body is not the enemy, and other people's bodies are not the competition." And I really loved that quote, and I also really love the book, so I'm going to show it here. Body Respect by Linda Bacon and Lucy Aphramore. If you haven't read this one yet, or you haven't read Health at Every Size by Linda Bacon, I highly recommend it. It's the book I usually send people to all the time, especially if they're new to learning about the weight health connection, because it's really not what we're told it is. And all the information is in here, and many different resources, but this is such a good one-stop shop that I always recommend this book. So in addition to it sort of not being our fault that we just kind of naturally want to critique and judge ourselves, we also have to take a little look at the history, particularly for women. So when Anna was submitting this question, she asked more specifically about how do I stop comparing myself to other women. Of course, this can go for all people, and depending how you identify, you can find yourself comparing yourself to different body types. The comparison happens. But I'm going to speak particularly in this moment just to sort of historically how this has affected women and why we can compare ourselves so much and be really have this sort of real drive to make ourselves quote unquote better or fit the beauty ideal. Let's remember that not too long ago, women were not actually seen as people, as full people. Women did not have rights as a full citizen. When a woman got married, she became the property of her husband. So it's why women gave up their name, because they now became the property of the man. And when women weren't really allowed to work, and women could hold different jobs, but let's look at the upper class woman. She just didn't work, right? That didn't happen. So she wasn't allowed to own property unless it was handed down, and there were no other brothers around that could claim that inheritance. It was literally vital to a woman's survival to be married to a man, and in one of the ways that they could attract a man was to be beautiful. So there's a real historical, genetic, because a lot of these feelings and ideas and traits get passed down through the generations, and there's some, and I'm not like a scientist, so I can't get into the specific details, but there is some talk and some evidence showing that these, feelings and drives can be passed down biologically. So let's just say that we've inherited a lot of this drive to be beautiful and to fit the ideal and to be attractive. And it's so rooted in us because it was about survival. So if you think about that, we can kind of cut ourselves a bit of a break and understand that this isn't just us being hard on ourselves all the time, just like an understanding of where this comes from. So knowing that, we can relax a little bit because we don't have to rely on somebody else, thank God, to support us anymore. We are fully autonomous human beings, and of course we still have a long way to go in order to receive equality on all fronts, but we are here now. But yet this drive to still be beautiful and to have this status in our culture that gives us a certain value and respect and adoration, that feels really good. And so we can see and so kind of going back to the history part, it's why we could see other women as competition, because they could have been the person that was between us getting the man who would give us this great life. So it was a competition. I'm kind of going a little bit in a tangent here, but I want to just make that clear that this drive and this competition comes from this survival instinct. So moving on, we are autonomous. So what can we do now? How can we start to accept our bodies and stop comparing ourselves to other people and seeing them as a competition or thinking that they're better than us? And another thing we need to do is realize that there's a beauty standard, an ideal that always changes, and it's pretty arbitrary. Okay, I haven't studied the history of the evolution of the beauty standard. I am fascinated to know that one day. But right now, we're at a point where there's a particular ideal. And when we get our value and our worth and our sense of confidence from having to look like this beauty ideal, and if the further we are from that, the more critical we're going to be of ourselves. So one thing that's really, really important is when we can stop comparing ourselves. Just some really simple practical tools are, if you're one to read magazines or scour the internet and looking at celebrity bodies, just stop doing it. Stop putting yourself through that and constantly comparing. Because firstly, most of those people, how they're doing it is very, very intentional. A lot of times it's not healthy. And so all it does is just send us down a spiral of thinking we're not good enough when we're constantly comparing. And then what we need to do is come back to ourselves and start to connect here. Realize that it's not a competition. Okay, we don't have to vie for our value and our worth. We're not better or worse than somebody else, because we're always going to be better or worse than somebody else in some aspect. And if this is just the beauty ideal of the day, that will change. So if we're constantly just looking to get the value externally, we're always going to lose in some way. So we come back to ourselves and start to get our value internally. Start to focus on what are my strengths and what am I here to bring to the world? Because there are people who love you. There are people who are going to find us attractive because they value us for us. So it's about going inwards instead of going outwards. And that's really the core of what I do in my one-on-one coaching with people, is to always bring you back home and to find what is it that you want for your life? What is it that you enjoy? And how can you move forward to living your life like that, as opposed to what we've learned externally, how we're supposed to live our lives. So practices that bring us home, always connecting to ourselves. So we can do that by journaling, just starting to write down things that are good about ourselves, that we like about ourselves, writing out what we want for our lives and focusing on that. And starting to question these thoughts that we have about ourselves and our body. So if we think, oh, I'm ugly, question the validity of that. Like, is that true? I use the work of Byron Katie a lot of times to question any thought that is stressful for me. And I can give a link down below to thework.com where you can check that out for yourself as a tool. Other things are to start to cultivate positive statements about yourself by putting them on Post-it notes or mantras. I love wearing intention bracelets, just things like that say trust, to remind me to trust myself, self-care, or if it's something that you're struggling with appearance-wise, like beauty, I'm beautiful. Things to remind yourself that it's not a competition. We all inherently have worth and value. And to start to repeat those patterns. And also, if you're not doing it already, starting to follow people, body positive role models on social media who are of all different sizes, because we need to start exposing ourselves to different ideas of beauty, different bodies, because we are only seeing a tiny, tiny percentage of one type of body that most of the time, again, not everybody, they don't naturally look like that. Okay. Another tool that I want to recommend is a program that Vivian McMaster runs called Be Your Own Beloved. And she actually really uses her camera and taking selfies to start to develop this relationship with your own body and yourself in a really positive way. So I'll again put a link below to Be Your Own Beloved. So, and actually another book recommendation I want to give too is called The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf. If you haven't read that yet, because it's going to really start to get into, it's kind of heavy, I'm not going to lie, like it really gets into how the construct of beauty has actually really oppressed women. And sometimes that can be enough to get us to say, like, I'm not buying into this anymore. So those are my thoughts on that question right now. It takes time. It takes practice, and to just be gentle with ourselves. Like, it's like this old record that's been playing with deep grooves, telling us, picking apart our body, things that are right or wrong. And it's going to take a while to change that. I kind of sometimes like to think when I have these thoughts about my body that are negative or stressful, I just like to say that's an echo from the past. Because when you've just been shouting it, it's going to reverberate and reverberate, but then it gets quieter and quieter. So I hope that helped give a little bit of insight. If you're not already, those of you who are watching, following me on Instagram, you can do so at Christina Bruce, Christina with a K, Bruce _coach, also on Facebook. If you like this video, like it. You can subscribe. If you have a question that you would like to have answered, you can answer it. I'm going to put a link below that you can go in and have your question answered. Or if you just want to be notified when I post my next video, you can also just put in your name and email address on that link and you'll get it sent right to your email. And when you do that, you'll also get a copy of my Body Acceptance Jumpstart Guide that has a host of resources to help getting you started on body acceptance and just feeling much better about yourself. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Bye. See you at the next video.